I am indeed grateful to you, mon cher compatriot, for your curiosity. However, there is nothing extraordinary about my story. Since you are interested, though, I'll tell you that I thought a little about that laugh for a few days, then forgot about it. Once in a great while I seemed to hear it within me, but most of the time, without making any effort, I thought of other things. Yet I must admit that I ceased to walk along the Paris quays. Whenever I travelled along them in a car or bus, a sort of silence would descend on me. I was waiting, I believe. But I would cross the Seine, nothing would happen, and I would breathe again. I also had some trouble with my health at that time. Nothing definite, a dejection perhaps, a sort of difficulty in recovering my good spirits. I saw doctors who gave me stimulants. I was alternately stimulated and depressed. Life became less easy for me. When the body is sad, the heart languishes. It seemed to me that I was half unlearning what I'd never learned and yet knew so well, how to live. Yes, I think it was probably then that everything began. But this evening I don't feel quite up to the mark either. I even find trouble expressing myself. I'm not talking so well. It seems to me my words are less assured. Probably the weather. It's hard to breathe. The air is so heavy it weighs on one's chest. Would you object, mon cher compatriot, to going out and walking in the town a little? Thank you. How beautiful the canals are this evening. I like the breath of stagnant waters, the smell of dead leaves soaking in the canal, and the funeral scent rising from the barges loaded with flowers. No, there's nothing morbid about such a taste, I assure you. On the contrary, it's a deliberate act on my part. The truth is that I force myself to admire these canals. What I like most in the world is Sicily, you see, and especially from the top of Etna in the sunlight, provided I dominate the island and the sea. Java too, but at the time of the trade winds. Yes, I went there in my youth. In a general way, I like all islands. It is easier to dominate them. Charming house, isn't it? The two heads you see up there are heads of Negro slaves. A shop sign. The house belonged to a slave dealer. Well, they weren't squeamish in those days. They were self-assured. They announced, "You see, I'm a man of substance. I'm in the slave trade. I deal in black flesh." Can you imagine anyone today making it known publicly that such is his business? What a scandal. I can hear my Parisian colleagues right now. They are adamant on the subject. They wouldn't hesitate to launch 2 or 3 manifestos, maybe even more. And on reflection, I'd add my signature to theirs. Slavery? Certainly not. We're against it. That we should be forced to have it in our homes or in our factories, well, that's natural. But boasting about it, that's the limit. I am well aware that one can't get along without dominating or being served. Every man needs slaves as he needs fresh air. Commanding is breathing. Do you agree with me? And even the most destitute manage to breathe. The lowest man in the social scale still has his wife or his child. If he's unmarried, a dog. The essential thing, after all, is being able to get angry with someone who has no right to answer back. One doesn't answer back to one's father. You know the expression? In one way, it's very odd. To whom should one answer back in this world if not to what one loves? In another way, it is convincing. Somebody has to have the last word. Otherwise, every reason can be met with another one and there would never be an end to it. Power, on the other hand, settles everything. It took time, but we finally realised that. For instance, you must have noticed that our old Europe at last philosophises in the right way. We no longer say, as in simple times, "This is my opinion, what are your objections?" We've become lucid. For the dialogue, we have substituted the communique. "This is the truth," we say. "You can discuss it as much as you want. We aren't interested. In a few years, there'll be the police to show you I'm right." Oh, this dear old planet. All is clear now. We know ourselves. We now know of what we are capable. Just take me to change examples, if not subjects. I have always wanted to be served with a smile. If the maid looked sad, she poisoned my days. She had a right not to be cheerful, to be sure. But I told myself that it was better for her to perform her service with a laugh than with tears. In fact, it was better for me. Yet without boasting, my reasoning was not altogether idiotic. Likewise, I always refused to eat in Chinese restaurants. Why? Because when they are silent and in the presence of whites, Orientals always look scornful. Naturally, they keep that look when serving. How then can one enjoy the lacquered chicken? And above all, how can you look at them and think you are right? Just between ourselves, slavery, preferably smiling, is therefore inevitable. But we must not admit it. Isn't it better that whoever cannot do without having slaves should call them free men? As a matter of principle to begin with, and secondly, not to drive them to despair. We owe them that compensation, don't we? In that way, they will continue to smile, and we shall maintain our good conscience. Otherwise, we'd be obliged to reconsider our opinion of ourselves. We'd go mad with suffering, or even become modest, for anything might happen. Consequently, no shop signs, and this one is shocking. Besides, if everyone told all, displayed his true profession and identity, we shouldn't know which way to turn. Just fancy visiting cards. DuPont, jittery philosopher, or Christian landowner, or adulterous humanist. Indeed, there's a wide choice. But it would be hell. Yes, hell must be like that. Streets filled with shop signs and no way of explaining yourself. One is classified once and for all. You, for instance, mon cher compatriote. Stop and think of what your sign would be. You're silent. Well, you'll tell me later on. I know mine in any case. A double face, a charming Janus, and above it the motto of the house, "Don't rely on it." Why, shortly after the evening I told you about, I discovered something. Whenever I left a blind man on the pavement to which I had convoyed him, I used to touch my hat to him. Obviously the hat touching wasn't intended for him, since he couldn't see it. To whom was it addressed? To the public. After playing my part, I would take my bow. Not bad, eh? Another day during the same period, when a motorist thanked me for helping him, I replied that no one would have done as much. I meant, of course, anyone. But that unfortunate slip weighed heavy on me. At modesty, I really was a champion. I have to admit it humbly, mon cher compatriote, I was always bursting with vanity. I is the refrain of my whole life, and it could be heard in everything I said. I could never speak without boasting, especially if I did so with that shattering discretion of which I was a master. It is quite true that I always lived free and powerful. I simply felt released in my relations with everyone else for the excellent reason that I recognised no equals. I always considered myself more intelligent than anyone else, as I've told you, but also more sensitive, more skillful, a crack shot, an incomparable driver, a better lover. Even in the fields in which it was easy for me to verify my inferiority, like tennis for instance, in which I was but a passable partner, it was hard for me not to think that with a little time for practice I would surpass the best players. I found nothing but superiorities in myself, and this explained my goodwill and serenity. When I was concerned with others, it was out of pure condescension, in utter freedom, and all the credit went to me. My self-esteem would go up a degree. Along with a few other truths, I discovered these facts little by little in the period following the evening I told you about. Not all at once, nor very clearly. First, I had to recover my memory. By gradual degrees, I saw more clearly. I learned a little of what I knew. Until then, I had always been aided by an extraordinary ability to forget. I used to forget everything, beginning with my resolutions. Fundamentally, nothing mattered. War, suicide, love, poverty got my attention, of course, when circumstances forced me, but a courteous, superficial attention. At times I would pretend to get excited about some cause foreign to my daily life, but basically I didn't really take part in it, except of course when my freedom was thwarted. How can I express it? Everything slid off. Yes, just rolled off me. Let's be fair to myself. Sometimes my forgetfulness was praiseworthy. You have noticed that there are people whose religion consists in forgiving all offences, and who do in fact forgive them but never forget them. I wasn't good enough to forgive offences, but eventually I always forgot them. And the man who thought I hated him couldn't get over seeing me touch my hat to him with a smile. According to his nature, he would then admire my nobility of character or scorn my ill-breeding, without realising that my reason was simpler. I had forgotten his very name. The same infirmity that often made me indifferent or ungrateful made me magnanimous in such cases. I lived, consequently, without any other continuity than that from day to day of I. Without thought for the morrow with women, without thought for the morrow in virtue or vice, each day for itself, just like dogs. But every day myself secure at my post. Thus I progressed on the surface of life, in the realm of words, as it were, never in reality. All those books barely read, those friends barely loved, those cities barely visited, those women barely possessed. I went through the gestures out of boredom or absent-mindedness. Then came human beings. They wanted to cling, but there was nothing to cling to, and that was unfortunate for them. As for me, I forgot. I never remembered anything but myself.